Bloemendal to talk about on what he believes is the way forward when it comes to food security.
A bit taller than most, but namaskar. Thanks for being here. It feels a little bit like that post-lunch slot at the last day of a conference where everything has been set by all the rock stars before you, where everybody is waiting for the actual moment when the award show comes or people start talking about prices. But that's my bad luck, and I'm not the last one, so I'm going to keep it relatively short. And I'm going to recap a little bit of some of the most major points that I've heard here so far on the panel already. And this afternoon we had a fantastic meeting with the World Agricultural Forum. We discussed the needs around the world, how to bring everything together, how to bring the various NGOs together, the governments together, the commercials together, and making sure things are going to change in terms of a better food security for all. But to start with the good thing, and you mentioned it just now, if there's 30% food waste, that's the easiest way to feed the world, right? Let's get rid of the food waste. Reduce it to 20%, you can feed 10% more people, or even a little bit more. Your point, you said, well, there's going to be a multiple of the amount of people. Actually, it's going to cap out around 9.5 to 10 billion people in 2035. So we don't have to worry too much about it, as long as we stick to a few of the major things. And when I'm asked to speak about this, I normally use 4 different words: yield, inclusiveness, digitization, and controlled free trade. And I'm going to very briefly explain all of them. I want to start with inclusiveness, because that's exactly what you brought up. I'm very happy that you didn't speak in English, right? If you want to talk to the people that need to make a change, you need to connect with them. You need to speak to them in their own language. You need to follow up with them. For those of you who don't know me, I've lived 3 of my best years here in Mumbai. I was running a company at the time called Ruchi, which is now Patanjali. And I was in charge of all the commercial business for them. And what we did a lot, we changed it by going into the mandis, bringing an iPad with them, and in Hindi, in Marathi, in all the other languages, discuss with the farmers how much they produce, how much they wanted to sell. And that came together in a very clear production number that was another number than the 5 companies that were just mentioned, right? We need to share and we need to get this business going. So to get the inclusiveness going, we need to teach people. We need to train them, and we need to pay them fairly. And like one of us this afternoon said, we need to make farming and we need to make agri cool again, right? If we have an average age of 62, like we just learned, and it can become 35, that's what we need to do. Get more farmers in, get people interested to participate in the trade, and get them to be fairly rewarded. The second thing is yield. I spoke at a conference 2 months ago in Delhi. It was the IFPA conference. It was about edible oils. That's my background. And it was the very first time. I've been coming in India since 2006. And I lived here from 2012 to 2015. And I absolutely loved it. But the forbidden word at the time was a non-GM production, right? No one wanted to speak about it. And I never thought it would happen. But in June, July this year, it was actually discussed with the highest level of the edible oil industry. How can we increase yields? It's not about just trucks and fertilizers. It's about taking in best practice from around the world and making it work that way. So that's something that can really help. Yields in India have grown massively, 200–300% since I started coming here, but they're still at a quarter of the global yield. So if we can increase that, and we do it not just in India, but we do it in sub-Saharan Africa, we do it in all the emerging markets where there's a lot of population, where we don't lose too much from transportation, that's the first pickup. Inclusiveness I've discussed. Digitization. If you get the right information, you can make controlled decisions. You can know when to harvest, you can know when to sow, you can know when to add fertilizers to it. But you need to know what's being traded. You need to know what comes to the mandi. And for that, you need to have a digital pricing platform. A digital pricing platform will cut out not just the middleman, but it will cut out the big multinationals as well. I used to work at the big multinationals. I'm ex-Cargill, I'm ex-Citibank, I'm ex-Cofco. I know exactly how much I am making, or was making at the time, on the back of the farmers, and it's unfair. So if you are a local farmer community, like we have here in Maharashtra or in the whole of India, if you digitize your price discovery and you get the fair pricing going for the farmers, they will see a higher yield on their income, they will see a higher yield on their farm, and as a result, everybody prospers very fastly. And the last point is actually something that you just mentioned at the last point, about controls, about free trade. The biggest thing you can have as a country like India that is still depending in bad monsoon years of imports. On edible oils, you're still depending for 50% of your imports. make sure you have the free trade agreements in place. And they are in place in Southeast Asia. They're very, very efficient. They're very effective. But you also need to control them. And I think the brilliant thing that the government of India is doing is to have a free trade agreement, but to shift around with duties. So you have a free trade, but still not completely there. And that's the best way to protect your local interest while at the same time protecting the global interest. So those were the 4 main points that I wanted to bring up. Hopefully I recapped it a little bit and leave something available for the 2 more speakers that are coming after me.
Yes, please. Thank you, Paul. पॉल ने नमस्कार इसलिए बोला क्योंकि वो मुंबई में 3 साल रह चुके हैं. I'm assuming पॉल को नमस्कार से आगे भी कुछ हिंदी के वर्ड्स उन्होंने पिक किए होंगे.
I actually understood Hindi quite well when I was
All
here.
Right, good. उनको हिंदी पूरी तरह से समझ में आती है.
So I worked for Ruchi, and Ruchi had about 30,000 employees. And the day I started, everybody had to speak English, but the common language was Hindi. So they had to adjust to me, which is unfair because I am the guest. I came to you guys. And at the point, whenever we had an interesting discussion, at some point they would shift back to Hindi. And I would know exactly, okay, this is an important point. So after 3 years, I never told anyone this. After 3 years, I could actually understand what they were saying. So I was making my notes, and I was actually able to help them a lot
Good
better
for
that
you.
way. But don't ask me to say anything.
पॉल ने यहाँ पर 4 पॉइंट्स इंपॉर्टेंट कहे हैं जो इंडियन एग्रीकल्चर के लिहाज से काफी सही जाते हैं. एक तो इंक्लूजन यानी कि सबका साथ यहाँ पर हो, दूसरा उत्पादन बढ़ाने पे जोर हो, तीसरी बात उन्होंने कही डिजिटल को लेकर जहां पर काफी काम किया जाना चाहिए, और चौथा ये कि बार बार यहाँ पर नीतियां ना चेंज की जाए, बहुत ज्यादा कंट्रोल इसे ना किया जाए और थोड़ा सा फ्री छोड़ा जाए. तो 4 चीजें यहाँ पर हैं.